So good day, everyone. It's Josh Kepke here with Vancouver Real Estate Today, coming to you from my condominium in Yaletown. This is the new COVID coronavirus reality for how we're doing interviews now. I'm really excited because I've got Thomas Kyle with me, who I met at an Inform Interiors talk a few months back about landscape architecture, which is his specialty. And architects have to mind which descriptions they use based on different certifications and whatnot. So I'm going to let him introduce himself. Thomas, thank you so much for coming.
So here's the thing, homeowners, homebuyers, investors, we all want to find that perfect property to move into and to eventually sell for a profit. And we want to make that purchase in a place with affordable, safe, quality homes, communities, and businesses. Why? So we can actually enjoy our lives, take vacations, and spend the quality time we want with the people we love. How do we do all this without risking a fortune and running ourselves ragged? That's the big question, and this show is dedicated to the answer.
Josh, I'm thrilled to be here, and it was a delight to meet you at Inform. It was a completely full group of people. I had one chair beside me. You walked in late. You said, "Hey, is that chair available?" And I went, "Sure." And so that's wonderful. That's how we met, and I immediately knew that you had an interest in design. Welcome to all your viewers, and yes, I'm quarantined in my place as well. Thomas Kyle. I'm a student of landscape architecture at UBC 25 years ago. Also a master's in fine arts from the Victoria College of Art. So I'm not registered in British Columbia, so I need to call myself a landscape designer. But immediately after graduating at UBC, I was whisked down to Los Angeles, and my first client down there was Arnold Schwarzenegger. So I was thrown into this crazy world of way too much money, way too much possibility, and I learned an incredible amount. So my focus has been, for some time, on residential design. And when you're in Los Angeles in that world, you have so many beautiful opportunities because you're introduced to Tuscan design, authentic Tuscan. You're introduced to very contemporary work. You're introduced to English perennial. You're introduced to a world of exciting design opportunities. I was there for several years, then I came back up to Canada, where I've been involved in public plazas, large-scale, multi-residential. I've been involved in historical work. I've been involved in environmental protection work as well. So my background is fairly extensive, and that's where we lie.
Wow, so you've been doing this 25 years, and you had the governor as one of your clients.
He was almost my first client. I was working for a company at that point, so it wasn't officially my client, but I was leading that whole project. And so, yeah, in that world, you just spend a lot of time with movie stars and producers and governors' wives, and a huge amount of time with these people. They're just wonderful. Love them.
What did you do for them? We got to know that. What did you design for them?
They had a huge estate just off Sunset Boulevard, and it was actually two houses. And what they wanted to do was take down the two houses and build one massive, massive estate. But in the meantime, that's going to take 3 or 4 years. So they need to be relocated to one single large estate. I was in charge of that one large estate, which ended up being their permanent residence. It was a huge place, a tennis court, 2 swimming pools, outdoor fireplace. It was magnificent. And I don't want to get into too many details, because I'm subject to non-disclosure agreements.
Yeah.
But I'll just say they were wonderful clients. And so that exposure to such interesting projects led to what I'm doing now.
Amazing. Well, I got to say that must have been quite an experience, because I know he does a lot even on the affordable housing stuff down there in California right now. So it must have been a fantastic person to work with.
He's a brilliant man. He's absolutely brilliant. Yeah.
Imagine. So why don't we start off with, what is landscape architecture? I remember when we first met, and I told you I had been at one of those previous talks, and someone from LA had mentioned that the architects call the landscape architects shrubbies, which is not a term any of the landscape architects.
Oh yeah, that one really got me.
I know.
I didn't talk to you for 5 minutes after that.
So yeah, I know I need to think before I speak sometimes. But tell us what you actually do.
Josh, it's such a good question.
Hmm.
And, you know, if we go back to the beginning in one way, 5,000 years ago in Egypt, gardens developed through necessity. They developed through agriculture. You had to grow your vegetables, you had to grow your fruit, you had to bring a water source. So they were more utilitarian. And then they realized as they were developing these beautiful green spaces, the human being was attracted to these spaces. And they realized, heck, we can sit under a tree. It becomes an area for shade. We can have water closest to us, and it becomes an opportunity for shade and drinking water simultaneously. So suddenly, a space that was utilitarian to feed a large group of people becomes a space for quiet, for zen, for relaxation, and for renewal. So as soon as the human being shifts your thinking, it opens a world of opportunities. And so if it started 5,000 years ago from that level, in one way, if you really think about it this way, in one way, nothing's changed. We want to be in a good place. So landscape architecture is the opportunity to design beautiful living environments for the human being outside. And within that range, within that scope, it's ginormous. It could be a tiny little back garden in East Vancouver, or it could be an entire city. I mean, landscape architecture is all encompassing. It's enormous, and it's very, very exciting. So that doesn't really answer your question, but it gives you an overview of how large a profession it actually is and what it encompasses. And then adding to that, we work very, very closely with cities. We work very closely with planners and with engineers and with architects and with the groups of people, whether it be senior citizens in a senior citizens development, or a very large multi-residential development, or a huge public plaza that has profound importance to the city and to the people that are living there. Or as I say, a tiny little backyard in East Vancouver. All of them have the opportunity to design something beautiful.
You know what I've noticed before I even got into real estate was that East Vancouver always has gorgeous little backyards. It's very, very nice, very charming what you see when you walk the streets there.
And boulevards.
Mm-hmm.
They embrace their space.
So let me ask you this: how did you discover landscape architecture?
Oh, it's a great question. I was finishing off my master's degree in fine arts, and I realized I did not want to be a poor, struggling artist. And my brother came over to the house for dinner. I'm still living at home, I think, and he brought in a new girlfriend. She was a landscape architect. I'd never even heard of the term, and I went, landscape? I love it. Architecture, I love it. Who is this person and what do they do? I sat with her for 3 or 4 hours.
Wow. And
then within a week or two, I was signed up at UBC Landscape Architecture. I have to do it. And for those people that are aware of some of the incredible designs that came out of Mexico, Louis Barragan, I saw his work when I was a student of landscape, a student of fine arts. And the most beautiful landscapes I'd ever seen in my life. And they were sculptural. And I saw them when I was a student of fine arts, and I thought, I want to do this. So if any of you viewers look up Louis Barragan, B-A-R, Barragan, they'll see the most exquisite sculptural shapes and forms in landscape that have inspired thousands and thousands of people.
Wonderful. So what do you think? Like, I know that, well, what sector would you say is the most rewarding for you working in landscape architecture? Because if gardens developed out of necessity and then it expanded to, more pleasure or enjoyment.
Exactly.
Where do you get the most enjoyment? Applying design principles to create.
Beautiful questions, Josh, because I know I can deliver the very, very best product when I feel it in here.
Yeah.
When I feel as you do, on Christmas morning as a kid, those are very, very real emotions. I am passionate, really passionate about residential design, because in one way it's where we spend so much of our time, And when you begin to understand the different layers, the context of space, the context of architecture, the design principles of a particular type of architecture, when you bring all that in together and you deliver a product that the client really loves, that really functions beautifully for all the members of the family, that functions beautifully for the environment and the context, that's thrilling for me. And Arthur Erickson once said, the most difficult designs were the residential designs, because every square inch counts. If you design a huge, huge building, in one way you design a portion of it and you repeat it. Right. There's a lot more involved in that. A lot of architects are going to slap me down for saying that. But when you design a residential piece, every square inch can be thoughtfully specialized and thought through. I love getting into that level of detail. I love thinking it through, and you walk from the time you actually exit the street from public into private space is an exciting journey of just threshold after threshold until you walk through the front door of the house. It can be beautiful and functional all at the same time.
So you know what? Landscape is always one of the biggest value adds for real estate when people are selling. And we want to talk about curb appeal. It all boils down to the landscape. So I can see what you mean, how impactful it is.
It is impactful. It's so many different layers and levels.
So I got to say, there is a real privilege to being able to do this interview over a Zoom call, because we can do a bit of show and tell, which we wouldn't be able to do otherwise. And while you've got some amazing projects on your website and you've sent me a couple of drawings to look at, I wanted to walk through some of those. So where do you want to start? Do you want to start with the drawings or the website?
I'd love to start with the website. And if we can start with, I think it's called Courtyard in East Vancouver. It's a little courtyard with those sort of checkerboard squares.
Yeah, this.
And I want to bring this in kind of into a focus, because we'll go down a little bit, down.
This one.
Down. There you go. Yeah, a tiny courtyard in Vancouver. That really is an East Vancouver tiny project. And when I moved back from Los Angeles doing these massive estates, somebody asked me to do this, and I thought, what an incredible opportunity for me to apply what I know, create the most beautiful space I possibly can within a very, very, very tight time frame, tight budget, and a tight space. And basically the client wanted a big space to entertain 50 people. He wanted a space that his kids to play, and he wanted a very intimate and romantic space. So the first thing I did was just develop the perimeter, and I layered that so that you had a sense of interior screening and beauty at the same time. And then by using this grid pattern, it creates a sense of intimacy, but you can easily see 50 people on this back patio.
Yeah.
That is actually, and it's also permeable. So a huge portion of this project is permeable. So it meets all of the objectives that the city requirements lay out for you. And then at the same time, you can put a couple of chairs beside that water feature at the very end, have a glass of wine at 9 o'clock on a summer's night when the kids have gone to bed, and you can feel the space just wrapping you in a very romantic way. So the whole idea was to have a sense of beauty, a sense of practicality, and a sense of romance. And so it was sort of like a bohemian approach. And this design literally took me about 5, 6, 7 hours to design. And I don't mean to, honk my own horn on this, but it's been published. It's won 2 design awards. And I'm just so thrilled that these clients that did not have a big budget, but had a big idea of what they wanted, was such a wonderful success. So it doesn't matter if you've got $10 million for a Beverly Hills project, or if you've got $25,000 or $20,000 for a beautiful backyard. Every opportunity to create something that I hope is beautiful, that I hope has function, and for the clients, is just a wonderful opportunity to embrace. And that's a three-dimensional sketch. So you can see how small that project is. But the kids were able to roll their bicycles in the back. The family was able to to have large gatherings and intimate spaces at the same time. There's almost no maintenance there. So it really met so many requirements, as well as it really appealed to the design community by being, this blew my mind, I got 2 design awards for this.
Wow.
And it's been published in an international design magazine. So it's kind of fun.
It's really nice. You know, before we started recording here, we were joking a bit about my current romantic interests, and I'm thinking, how good's your relationship with these clients? Can we make this available for me to do a little date night on it?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you know, the amazing thing, when you're involved at the level of residential design, and you bring up a very, very important point, Josh, you become very close to your clients. Mm-hmm. They become an extension of you, and you become an extension of them. And you have to understand how the family works. What are the group dynamics? How much space is required for certain programming? And whether it is an Arnold Schwarzenegger or a beautiful family in East Vancouver, you become very close to them, and you create a very trusting relationship, and that's so critical in delivering a product that I think meets their requirements and becomes successful.
Now, my mother has always had a million fountains on her property.
That's great.
And I've learned that they are a great way to mask road noise. And I'm looking at this one and I'm wondering, how powerful is this fountain? Is it like, does it shoot up, or is it a quiet kind of babble?
It's a wonderful question, because on this road, and I don't want to give the address to the client, but on this road, you didn't need to mask. The fountain is often referred to as white noise, whereas the cars are referred to as off-site noise. And this fountain was only meant as a Zen focal point, so that you could congregate around it. And it's very simple and gentle, and it's not meant to be terribly loud. So it's a great question. There are some projects that you'll see on my website that are meant more to be white noise, which is attractive, gentle noise to cover up some of the off-site noise. But this one not. This one was just a very Zen kind of a thing. And
how did you pick the different plants? Because I know that's a huge thing. It's like the pink in your
beautiful question.
Palette.
It's a beautiful question, because I can sit down and do a planting plan, and after doing this for 25 years, I know what'll work in a site. I know the conditions requirements for sun and shade. I know the sizes. I know their growth. I know how to do all this stuff. But instead of doing it that way, I took the clients to the nursery, a beautiful wholesale nursery out in Abbotsford or something. And I just said, tell me what you love. Mm. And I did it at a time of year that you're seeing some things in bloom. So we timed it. And I said, just tell me what you love. Tell me the ingredients that appeal to you. And from that, we were able to develop what is called a materials palette. It's just like cooking. If you're doing a sushi dinner, you're not going to include roast beef and Yorkshire pudding. You're going to find the materials palette that work for your sushi. And so building your materials palette plays into the design principles of what you're creating. Whether it be food, whether it be how you're dressing. If you're going out to play tennis, you're not going to wear a tie. You're going to wear a tie someplace. It's how you build these things that works for the occasion. So by taking them out, and immediately I realized they love purples. They love layers of purples and yellows. Let's celebrate that. Let's create something beautiful that appeals to the client. It's so exciting.
What color was the house?
What's that?
What color was the house?
Great question. It was a bright blue. They painted it bright blue. So even before we got started, I knew the clients were creative, dynamic, bold people. So Josh, you're in real estate. The magic of reading a client is 80% of what you got to do. So just by getting out of your car and looking at their house. Are they conservative? Are they modern? Are they bold? How do you work with them to just really bring out something that's important to the client, that's creative, that's dynamic, that's beautiful? Mm-hmm. So right away, their house was on this sketch that you're looking at, we dumbed it down into this gray just to kind of focus on the landscape, but it's a very bright blue.
Very cool. So could we go look at one of your more ostentatious ones? The huge.
Sure, let's go.
That's the wrong word.
Let's go to Tuscan in
That's
Beverly
the wrong
Hills.
word. Yeah, it's massive.
We'll go up.
This thing, look at this.
Yeah, that's kind of crazy. I won't say who the client was for this, but it's a pretty famous client. And what's so cool about this project, which it's so different from the last tiny little one that we saw.
Yeah.
This is in Southern California. It's in Beverly Hills, and it is truly Tuscan. So now here's the exciting thing. I didn't know what Tuscan was. I was from West Vancouver. I knew what Arthur Erickson Modern was.
Yeah.
I knew what Contemporary was. I had no idea what Tuscan was. So I was in charge of designing this. So the first thing I looked up were the design principles of Tuscan design.
Okay.
And they're so interesting. They're usually built on layers and hillsides. And they have long sight lines. So you can see at the very front where you have the fountain and the entry courtyard, and then you've got all the trees to the left. Those are olive trees, and there's a sight line in the middle.
Wow.
We brought in all those olive trees from San Francisco. Olive trees were used huge amounts in Tuscany.
Yeah.
And the sight lines were important because they needed to know if any threats were way down at the end of the garden. They needed to know were there animal threats, were there robbers. So sight lines became a very important aspect of the design principles for Tuscan. Water, courtyards, layers of green, not a lot of color, not a lot of flowers. You don't find that in Tuscan. You find a lot of layers of green. So that this aerial shot taken by a drone gives you an understanding of the layers and layers of green and the sight line. So we can continue. So when you drive in, it's a water feature. And a water feature in almost any Tuscan project is central. It's central to the design, and it's central to any courtyard. And so there's a whole series of beautiful water features that run through this project. So if you continue to the next, there is your alley of olive trees that we brought in from San Francisco. Now that is a typical sightline. But what that does is it allows you to grow olives. These aren't real growing olives, but if this were a true Tuscan project like that, you would grow olives. You would have a clear sight line to the end of your property. You would have shade, and you'd be close to a water source. So when I discovered all the design principles and I took them all together and I created this, it worked. It really worked. It's not just a hodgepodge of nothing. It is clear on the layers and principles of Tuscan design. And I'm a huge believer in this, Josh, because if you understand how you put component parts together, you can understand how to tear them apart and to change them and to work with them. But if you don't have an overall concept or understanding, it's very hard to understand where you even start. So I started
apart the architects from the gardeners.
Yeah. Yeah. So the architecture is true Tuscan. Yeah. And I can talk about that. But if you go on to the next series of slides.
Yeah, just to be clear, I mean the landscape architects, because you're taking the components and putting it together with some principles and theory behind them rather than a hodgepodge, like you said.
Precisely, Josh.
Yeah.
Precisely.
Wow. And I've driven through Tuscany, and this feels familiar, so I'm impressed.
No, that's really cool. That's really cool. And then there's bougainvillea growing up on the near the front entry, creating a lot of shade. This little round thing on the bottom left-hand corner of my screen, it's actually a pizza oven, and that's very traditional. I'm not a big palm trees fan, but the client wanted some palm trees. It's not something necessarily that I would have included, but other than that, it's large open expanse of greens, and then inner courtyards. So if you continue with your slides here, this is the guest house, and we created a whole series of courtyards. And then walking around, see the amount of shade that I bring in with these large trees. And then another water source, of course, which is the swimming pool.
Yeah, you need shade out there for sure. That's like a big issue in that part of the world.
Yeah.
Wow, look at that pool. That looks pretty serene and like somewhere I want to visit.
Cool. Hopefully it's inviting. Hopefully it's an inviting space. And you can see that the hardscape, which is the area surrounding the pool, the steps, and all that sort of thing, it speaks to the architecture in the background. They're not in contrast to each other. They're actually in harmony in terms of palette colors and palette choices. In fact, it's very mute in terms of, I'm not going with bright. There's so much sun there. Try to keep it calm and gentle, and the overall works in a coherent whole. And that's very important.
Do you have, like for this particular project or even in general, do you have control or some say on the hardscape?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
100%. And I mean, very often people think of landscape architecture, landscape designers as plant people. The plants are a huge, very vital and important aspect, but it might be 20%. I mean, you've got the hardscape spaces, you've got the grading, you've got the drainage, you've got sight lines, you've got view corridors, you've got city requirements. You've got a huge plethora of things to consider. And you've got to, just like anybody in what they do as a professional, you got to bring them all together so it looks as if nothing was done. They all just got to come together and think, oh, nice. And then you know you've achieved your objective. But the hardscape layout, I actually designed that first. I designed the hardscape passages and the thresholds and the corridors and the entry sequences first. And I do that, and then I push into the softscape areas, and then eventually I'll do my planting plan. It's just like an architect is not going to figure out what furniture he's putting in the living room before he's designed the living room. He's got to figure out the context of space and then bring in how the furniture is going to flow within that space. Think of the plants as the furniture. How does that flow? Where do you need the heights? Where do you need the lower spaces? Where do you need the volume? Where do you need the open spaces against the volume? Where do you need the sight line? All that sort of thing comes into play. And where do you need the spices, like you're putting into a stew? Suddenly it'll go, wow, oh my goodness, that's a bright color, that's beautiful. It's like a spice in the stew. Awesome. Or beautiful lipstick on an evening when a woman is going out for the evening. Just flare it up. So all of this is just part of developing the palette of a project.
Wow, that was so eloquently said. I think it's really enlightening to think of the plants as the furniture, and the spice is not something I'd heard before, so I like that characterization. And as someone who has a background in French cuisine from, oh God, a long time ago now, 15 years, it's very resonates. Yeah, amazing. Does anyone ever use these, once when I was growing up, we had a pool, and it was this kind of, it's almost like someone took a whole bunch of rocks and then mixed them together with glue and then spread them out. Do you know what that is? And it would just be so hot when the sun would hit it, so you couldn't walk on it in the heat.
Oh, I haven't actually designed one of those, but it sounds very interesting. But the picture you're on, if you look at the big umbrella and everything behind that, you're seeing layers and layers. Now, all of that was designed. I designed all of that as a true Tuscan approach. So you've got the very, very strong toothpick vertical elements. Yes. Those are true Tuscan trees, and they're evergreen. They're Italian cypress. And so the vertical element mixed with the very large volume of the background trees creates a sense of layering that you would just see in a Tuscan landscape. So what you're seeing, every tree, everything you're seeing was designed intentionally to create what has been created.
And is one of them like an anchor that you build out from? Like, are those toothpick trees, I think as you described them, are they where you build out from? Like, where do you start?
Oh, it's a great question. I always start from the largest component and then lead to the smaller ones, because if I know I'm making the large cohesive, the anchoring components work together as a whole, the small components always come together. It's sort of like, if you're doing a stew, I don't know if you start with the spices, but I would always start with the meat and the potatoes. So I would start, as I say, with the layout or the site plan of how the spaces work, where they're going, where's the best position for a swimming pool. You're not going to put it on the east-north side because it gets absolutely no sun. You put it on the west-south side, so it gets maximum sun in the evening and in the afternoon. So that begins to dictate where your trees go. And are there certain sight lines and view corridors you want to hide? How do you do that? How much volume is required for that? And there are certain sight lines and view corridors you want to keep open, the mountains or the ocean.
Yeah.
How do you do that? So you don't just understand the context of site and the context of architecture. You understand the context of all your view corridors. And that could be miles here, miles there, miles here, and miles there. So everything begins to influence how you put these components together.
Amazing.
Every site is different, Josh.
Look at this. How would you not want to sit there by the poolside? Wow. And the grasses, they're like,
yeah,
they're the same grass?
Yeah, wonderful, wonderful stuff in Southern California. We're getting more and more into this stuff up here. These grasses are spectacular. They require almost no maintenance. Look at the shades, the shadows that begin to develop. So you go from a very formal context to a mid area, which is less formal. And as you go up the slope, it's very informal. These grasses retain the slope beautifully. And it's just, they just, in the winds, they just move around and they become very musical. So this is used a lot in Southern California, and we're using a lot more grasses here as well. It's a beautiful component. It's a beautiful part of the palette that you can use.
Yeah. Okay. Wow, that's a nice, it's very clean lines.
It works. Yeah. No, I'm pleased with this project.
You should be, yeah.
I should absolutely say I was the senior designer for Christine London Limited at this stage. Christine London, truly one of the greatest designers in North America. She's got a spectacular company in Beverly Hills. She's my mentor. I love her with all my heart, and she just thrusted me into this this magic, and I am forever grateful for what I've learned. She's originally from London, England. She had a practice there. She had a practice in New York. She's made a spectacular practice out of Los Angeles, but she works all over the place. And it was a spectacular opportunity for me to work with Christine London.
And how did that come about? How did you meet Christine? What's the story?
I was living in Vancouver. I'd finished at UBC. A job opportunity came up. We spoke over the phone. We connected. They flew me down. And before I knew it, I was sitting at their design studio and meeting with spectacular people and just having a run of our lives. So yeah, it was extraordinary.
Sounds great. The architect world and landscape architect world sounds so I don't know, it just sounds like artists having a good old time, like talking about philosophy, and then somehow we end up with these really cool projects to work on.
You know, Josh, I'm making it sound really great, really romantic. 20% of my job is great fun. Yeah. 80% is sitting down and literally working for 14 hours nonstop, and then showing it to the client and getting rejected. And then you have to do it again, and you have to be on budget. And then suddenly you're over budget, you're out of time. I mean, all the components that go into this have to be navigated carefully. But that's the site plan.
Right.
That's my drawing showing everything we've just talked about. Where the pool is, where the series of layers of trees are, where the inner courtyards are, where the line of olive trees are, etc.
And so how do you express this vision in this plan we're looking at and convey, this?
Yeah.
This, because I mean, I have a hard time until we're looking at the finished product, and I imagine you end up with that with clients too. And
yeah,
so how do you convey your vision?
Well, it's a great question, because back in the day when I designed this, what we would do is do boards, and we would have images on the boards. We wouldn't even do it on the computer. We really wanted to do it in a very tactile, very human way. And that we would show images of Tuscan, true Tuscan design and beautiful Tuscan landscapes. And so that those 8 trees, those beautiful olive trees, I would have an image of what that looks like. And I would show the client in context of the inner courtyard. And so he and she would say, I get it. Let's go on to the next area. This is what your slope area will look like. This is what your pool area will look like. This is how we're handling the sports court area, which is a little bit higher. This is how I'm handling the grades. This is where your retaining walls are going. This is the flow that you'll walk through from your office into the backyard. This is how you get to your pizza oven. This is the inner courtyard that surrounds your guest house. And you have images say 1,000 words. And then it begins to build and build and build and build, and then you gain their trust. And as it gets constructed, you can modify it and change it as it goes. That impacts the budget. You make modifications as you go, because the client at that point becomes extremely involved. And that's a beautiful point, because you want to navigate that very, very carefully. You want to keep to the design without going too far off, but you want to make sure that you can be nimble and you can adjust to the client as they say, oh, what if we made this slight modification? And you go with that. And then at the end, it's pretty much as you've designed it. It's on budget, it's on time, and everybody's happy. In fairyland tale. But very often, if you can really navigate that with a sense of nimbleness and joy and appreciation for the process, you very often end up with a really wonderful result.
Amazing. And it sounds a lot like a mood board. It sounds like you would use a mood board. Is that
some people might call them mood boards. I call them image boards, material palette boards, vision boards.
Yeah.
But you would have literally 20 or 30 images that are all coherently related as you develop your plan.
Awesome.
Wow. So when you look at that,
yeah,
that's the end product,
mm-hmm.
and you go back to the drawing, you can see truthfully they're the same thing.
You're right. Let's just do
so they truly are the same thing. So this is actually really fun to look at it this way.
Well, when I was looking at it originally, I saw the cars, and that was sort of my signal for where to anchor it.
There you go. Fantastic. Yeah, I think this client had eight or nine cars, which is a little bit embarrassing, but it's fairly typical for Beverly Hills.
It's getting typical for here too.
No, I don't have that many.
Maybe not you, but some of West Van.
Yeah.
Too good. Do we want to look at any of the other projects, or do you want to look at this?
I would love to look at one more, and the one more is I think it's called British Properties Contemporary 2.
This one.
Yeah.
This is the one you showed me at Inform.
Yes. Now we've gone from Beverly Hills Tuscan, Southern California,
mm-hmm.
to West Vancouver in British Properties, kind of midway up the mountain.
Okay.
So everything changes, Josh. Your climate changes, the style of architecture. So here's a very contemporary piece of architecture. I was with M2 Landscape Architecture when I designed this. I was their senior designer. The architect is Doug Johnson. I love Doug Johnson. He does very contemporary work. And so the response had to be in kind.
Mm-hmm.
So all of the plants that you're looking at right now, the ferns and the hydrangeas, are shade-loving plants. The Sarcococa, this is a northern eastern corner of the entry court. And here is a beautiful opportunity to have a huge water feature that wrapped the entry, the living room, and the dining room. So in the next photograph,
yeah.
So the way I designed this, you would have your water feature in front of the living room, and then it wraps around. And so it looks as if the living room and dining room and part of the kitchen are actually floating in a portion of the water. Now this water is only, I think, 4 or 5, maybe 6 inches deep.
Yeah.
But we were able to put a wall around it, which gave it kind of like a frame that now speaks to the architecture. And then from there, you do your layers. And you can see how beautiful the sun comes in and creates the most glorious color shadows that reflect onto the water, that reflect into the house. So those are all considerations.
Wow.
Very, very careful considerations. This is actually the entry motor court. But how do you make a place that you can house 8 cars into something beautiful? So what I tried to develop is, okay, 8 cars can go here, but it's more about the beauty of the landscape. So we give layers of priority. So if you go into the next,
I gotta just say, this is what blows me away about the work that your profession does, is to think of something like that, the light coming through, bouncing off the water into the kitchen. Like, that's so many steps ahead of where my mind can take me that, yeah, it's very impressive.
Josh, you said you had some background in French cooking or Italian cooking?
I went to Le Cordon Bleu when I was 18.
Okay. I have to tell you something. I can barely make toast. So we can complement each other in our levels of understanding.
Yes.
I have so much appreciation for sitting down to the most beautiful dinner, and you can taste the layers and the flavors, and you say, my God, this is good. I don't know how to do it. I have no idea how to do that. Just as if the layers of understanding that go into creating something beautiful in landscape architecture, you may not know how to do, but we can still appreciate it. Yeah. And so when we get to that level of deep understanding and years of experience, and then you just have fun creating these layers, it's very beautiful. It's a beautiful involvement. So next time we meet, I expect a spectacular layered dinner from you, and we'll have a great time.
I like it. We'll do a double date. Let's see what else we can find here. So here it wraps around, and there's, you can see the water court. Yeah, we didn't see it from the other angle.
Yeah, and you can see how close the living room windows are. So really the water is almost right into the living room.
Let's see what else. Love the colors. The spice is there. You can see it. Some cayenne pepper in those trees.
Oh, that's great fun. Now in the back, this is a corner property. In the back, there are some massive, beautiful Acer macrophyllums, which is the big leaf maple, existing on the city side of the property, and that's on your right-hand side.
Some what?
They're called big leaf maple trees.
Oh, big leaf maple tree. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, Acer macrophyllum. So I took that palette, and I it's one of my favorite palettes. Look at those oranges and yellows, and so I just developed the palette based on that, and so the backyard is this putting green, which is kind of a really big thing. Sweeping all the way down the side is this grass, and then in front of the grass are black-eyed Susans, which are actually yellow. So you develop this whole series of palette in very, very long lines that speak to the very contemporary long lines in the architecture, but it also speaks to the context of the site. So hopefully, when the leaves fall down, it just looks as if it's always been there. We're not trying to disrupt it. We're trying to embrace it.
So good. Is this a hot tub or water?
It's a hot tub.
Yeah.
And again, I repeat, anybody that's familiar knows that grass is our Carl Forester, beautiful grass, and it moves in the wind, and it's beautiful in the summertime, it's beautiful in the wintertime, you don't cut it down. And so it creates a sense of just enough intimacy and movement for the pool area, because the pool's all about intimacy, it's all about movement, it's all about relaxation. Grasses are incredible for that.
It looks like a really low maintenance landscape. Like, I imagine you don't have to cut the green, and maybe this part you do, but that looks really nice to have too, the low maintenance.
And you can see that the patio is the same color as the house. And so it's not about the color of the patio, it's now about the big view, because there's a view right onto the Lionsgate Bridge from here. Spectacular view.
Wow.
Absolutely incredible. So what I'm trying to do is soften the space to maximize the impact of the view. And so when you're looking at that, it almost looks dull and somewhat boring, but you fully engage in the view, the West Vancouver view, right over the British properties, right into the water and right onto the Lionsgate Bridge. I don't want to interfere with that. I don't want to compete with that. I want to embrace it.
I think that's what we call site integration a little bit, right? Or Is that more?
Sure.
Yeah. That looks pretty picturesque. This looks like you're in the forest. This is hard for me to think this is the British properties. Look how this could be in the Kootenays or something, you know?
Oh, that's kind of cool.
Just because you don't see anything else around you.
Mm-hmm. Massive grade changes. And grade changes are, of course, when the property goes up by 10 feet or 8, whatever they are. So how do you integrate huge grade changes, put in a great big pool, meet with city guidelines, and trying to make it attractive? Well, if you do it with clear glass, and you do very elegant, we call them risers, but steps and stairs,
Right.
and then you try and bring plants as close to the wall as possible, eventually you hide the wall, and the grade changes become synonymous just with walking up and down. It's nothing more than just walking through space. One is higher than the other, but it doesn't become an arduous task.
Amazing. And then here we're back at this.
And then you're back to that. And then I think the last shot is of the entry in the front there.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And the layers and how the layers are very straight lines. And you can see how that really works with this architecture and with the existing trees in the back. You see the light through those trees. So everything in the front is very low. I wanted to fully embrace the existing context of that site and allow the existing trees back there that are all bright yellow right now through the sun to permeate through. So one of the things you want to do is study what the site looks like first thing in the morning at 7 o'clock. You want to know what it looks like at noon. You want to know what it looks like at 7 o'clock at night. You want to know where that sun goes down. You want to know what trees are behind that. Do we need to open it up? Do we need to enclose it more? You want to know your site, and so that you can embrace it and allow it to speak in its most poetic terms. So you really visit the site. You take photographs. You go, if you can, you go in the wintertime, you go in the summertime, you go in the springtime. You figure it out. And then it just sort of magically, it just helps you to design it. The more you understand it, the more it's going to help you design it.
It's incredible how much it makes the property too, because otherwise this could be a bit cold. But when you've got warm yellow leaves and reds and even the greens that sort of like embrace the built form, it brings a little more, I don't know, Mother Nature seems on the scene here.
Exactly, Josh, and that's really cool. I really appreciate you saying that.
So thank you for that. Let me ask you some of these sort of rapid fire, although we won't do them too rapidly, is that the questions that I had sent over, because these are really good ones, I think. Well,
you created the questions. They got to be good.
I'd love to tell you I created them, but Google is a fantastic tool.
Google's great, isn't it?
I did pick and choose to put them together, though.
Okay.
So, as far as landscape architecture goes, like what do you think is like the next big thing? Is there a next big thing in landscape architecture?
You know, it's an evolution. I think the awareness more and more that we design for human beings, not necessarily for developers, not necessarily so that cars and roads and everything, we develop for human beings. And then we ask ourselves, what is the most important thing for the human being? The health, the safety of the land, the safety of the people, to create zones that you feel comfortable and safe congregating in. But also the maintenance requirements have changed. We don't want to put a huge amount of fertilizers to maintain artificial environments anymore. We don't want to throw a huge amount of water at this stuff. And so the next big thing, I don't know if there's a next big thing. It's an evolution of consciousness. It's an evolution of awareness. So the more mindful we are of the environment that we live in and the opportunities that are presented to us, determine how we respond to them. And that becomes the next thing.
So good. Thank you. How about if you could travel back in time to a historical landscape, where and when would you go? It sounds like Egypt, but maybe I'm wrong.
Well, it's really interesting. There'd be two places. One would be Spain. It's called the Court of the Lions. It's called Alhambra in Spain. It's considered one of the greatest pieces of landscape architecture in the history of the world. I've never been there. I've seen so many pictures of it. Another one would be Tokyo, and go to some of the oldest Zen gardens. Right. I had the spectacular privilege to work with possibly the greatest Japanese landscape architect. His name is Masuno. He was Toshi Masuno. His name is, he's a Zen master. Patrick Mooney got me involved with him. Changed my life. I mean, I worked with him on helping to redesign. I wasn't involved in the design process. I did some of the drawings of the Notobi Gardens. And what this spectacular landscape designer, landscape architect Masuno did, he would take 5 or 6 hours to place a rock. The rock had pure energy. And so if I could see some of those great Zen gardens in Tokyo and throughout Japan, it would absolutely thrill me.
Very good, cool things. I could see that being really different. I'm glad you didn't say, like, I don't know, maybe some English gardens. That would be a little.
Well, they have their tremendous value as well. They have tremendous value.
Bedrooms.
Yeah.
How about I'll ask you just maybe a couple more here. What's a place maybe in Vancouver that you'd like to visit any time of the year, or even just in one specific season?
My partner and I were at Van Dusen Gardens about a month ago. It happened to be a beautiful, glorious day. And we, the cherry blossoms weren't out, the azaleas weren't out, but it was still spectacular. It's absolutely gorgeous. It's special, it's beautiful. There's some wonderful design to the Van Dusen. So that's something that pretty much everybody has an opportunity to go to. You've got that new part of it, which was built about 5 or 6 years ago. Cornelia Oberlander was the landscape architect. Truly one of the greatest in North America. Yeah. Love her. Love the influence that she's had. And Don Vaughn. I mean, there's so many. Ron Rule and Paul Sanger. There's so many great designers that we have just in the city of Vancouver. Mm-hmm. I mean, you can drive around and you see some beautiful Ron Rule projects. You see some beautiful Paul Sanger projects. Just drive around and find something for yourself and say, wow, take photographs if that appeals to you. The Notobi Gardens on the UBC campus is very, very beautiful. I'm partial to that because I was involved in that. Yeah. And, if you want some historical context, where I live in Shannon Mews, I live in the Heritage Building, Shannon Mews. That's an original 100-year-old Italian garden that was designed for this place. It's exciting. It's open to the public. Parts of it are. You have to be careful where you go. But it's an original 100-year-old Italian garden that was designed for this beautiful 10 or 12-acre estate for some very wealthy people in Vancouver, when this was all farmland. Right. And it's open to the public. So there's some beautiful areas to go to around Vancouver. And then, of course, you've got your parks and everything else. You've got Lighthouse Park in West Vancouver. You've got so much stuff here. It's endless.
That's fantastic. Yeah, we are privileged, and that's why people come from all over to be here, because we've got
absolutely
a beautiful natural setting.
Yeah, absolutely.
How about what's like a favorite plant that you have that to add?
Okay. As a culinary chef that you are, if I were to ask you what's your favorite spice, you would say, "Oh, Thomas, I don't have one." It's a combination of.
Sure.
So re-ask your question.
What's like a go-to bouquet that you use in your?
Again, it depends on what you're creating. If you're creating sushi, you're going to use the spices that gives you the best sushi. If you're creating spaghetti and a beautiful Italian dinner, it's different spices.
What's the favorite for people in West Vancouver then? What is the British Properties? What is their go-to?
Great. Now we're getting more specific, and that's really beautiful, because the British Properties, West Vancouver, very specific climate zone.
Mm-hmm.
Any type of fern or a series of ferns do extremely well up there.
Yeah.
Ground covers, and if you have beautiful trees coming out of the ground covers, it just flows with the natural environment. Beautiful autumnal colored trees flows with the natural environment. Very beautiful evergreen trees flows with the natural environment of West Vancouver. So if you understand the palette of West Vancouver and what does well, because they get a lot more snow and they get a lot more shade and they can get a lot of sun. So you just put all that together and you come up with a palette, and then you identify what is the architecture. Is it contemporary? Is it Romanesque? What is it? And then you identify how these things build on each other. But I'm very partial to the beautiful ferns. I'm very partial to putting an evergreen, a dark evergreen like a sarcococca up against a lighter evergreen. Or everybody does this, but if you put a yew hedge, which is tall and very, very dark, and in front of that you put a beautiful light-colored boxwood, it's just a play. It's a play of lights and darks. It's a play of line. Yeah. And as you play with those things, it just becomes enchanting.
All right, I got one more for you.
Okay. It better be your best question.
You just won the lottery. Now you're designing your dream home. Name one feature you absolutely have to have outside to make your dream home complete.
Openness. Openness, because I find if there's a sense of openness within that, I would include tranquility, beauty, calmness, and something that's gentle. Because after a long day's work and you've come home and you've driven in traffic, you're looking for something that's open and beautiful and gentle and calm.
Does that have to be a big lot, or could it be like the first one?
It can be the best designers in the world that do the most Zen 5x5 space are the Japanese.
Yeah.
It's pure Zen. And if you can understand how to make a space that's only 5 feet by 5 feet, move you so deeply, then you understand how to do one that's 10 feet by 10 feet or 100 miles by 100 miles, 100 acres by 100 acres. You get it. Open, calm beauty. And then from there, I feel inspired.
That's tremendous. So, Thomas, you've been very generous with your time. Is there anything I haven't asked you that you want to share or touch on?
Josh, I really, if the fact that you've shown interest in this, the fact that you sat beside me in that day and you talked a lot, I kept on asking you to be quiet, but that taught me that you were so interested. Your mind was open. So none of this is complex. So if anybody is thinking of designing their own property, ask themselves a simple question. What do I like? What makes me happy? What is beautiful? What do I think is beautiful? Start from there. Because if you think, I have to do it this way, I have to do it that way, just start with, I find this is beautiful. And then before you know it, you're building on those elements of beauty that come together to create something that's really wonderful for you. And part of my job as a designer is to facilitate the process and hopefully navigate it. So a client is spending a lot of money, gets what they want, but it doesn't have to be complicated. So if we approach it with a very joyful approach, very often the final result is a big success.
Amazing. And lastly, if people want to look at more of your work or find out more about you, is there somewhere we can direct them to go?
Well, the website, www.tkldesigninc.com is my website, but I'm not trying to sell myself here at all.
Yeah.
Just they can contact me or whatever. They can do it through you. But more importantly, just let them explore. Let them hopefully this has ignited some interest and different type of design, and they can just explore it.
Fantastic. Well, thank you again so much. And I will look forward to seeing you once we are out of this new rhythms that we're in right now.
Right. Our new reality here. Josh, I want to thank you. I want to thank you for giving me the opportunity. I want to thank you for opening these ideas to your clientele. Because at the end of the day, we're just sharing as human beings. We're sharing what we know. And then the world is a way, way better place.
Awesome. I agree with you 100% on that. Well, I think that's a great place to leave it. And
thank you, Josh.
yeah, we'll
thank you so much.
Vancouver Real Estate Today explores the art of living through genuine storytelling and localized expertise. If you enjoy what we do here, do us a favor and write us a review, and visit us at vancouverrealestatetoday.ca and discover the home that lets you express and live who you are.